To start our discussion on existing equipment technology for fresh cut mangoes, allow me to introduce today's speaker, Jeffrey Brandenburg, CEO of Q Fresh Labs and JSB Group with over 45 years of experience in package technology. Jeff has a BS in chemical engineer from Iowa State University with a minor in biochemical engineer and a master's in food safety from Michigan State University. He serves on the Sustainability Council of the International Fresh Produce Association. He was also the lead author on the Modified Atmosphere Packaging chapter of CRC's latest publication on modified and controlled atmospheres, as well as a contributed author to in the book Advances in Post-Harvest Management of Horticultural Produce. Jeff is a lecturer at Chapman University teaching a food packaging course, which is part of the Masters of Food Science program. He is also a lecturer at UC Davis in the Food Science Department, as well as the Post-Harvest Technology Center. He is also an adjunct professor of microbiology at a local college and at Bath University. He has been certified by the National Good Agricultural Practices Program at Cornell University as a Good Agricultural Practices online produce safety course instructor for the State of Massachusetts training program. And he is also on the board of the Hurricane Island Outward Bound School. With that being said, I want to invite Jeffrey to please start the webinar.
Thank you, Natalia. Great to see everyone. Well, at least to meet everyone. I look forward to giving this webinar. We're going to be going through the slides. Some of them will be gone through a little bit quicker because it's more technical background information. Some of the slides we'll be talking about in more detail. For those of you who participated in the webinar about a year ago, this is kind of the step 2 of that process. This one is focusing on mango processing equipment and packaging equipment, whereas the last one was more on the post-harvest physiology side. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important to, before we start, to understand that the quality, safety, shelf life of fresh cut mango, you can't really look at each of these things, equipment separate from post-harvest, separate from packaging. It really needs to be looked at in a much more uniform way. So even though we'll be focusing today on more of the equipment side of the equation, it's really important to keep in mind that you shouldn't look at just equipment alone. It's a total concept, and to maximize and optimize that quality and shelf life, you want to look at all the important parameters and factors that impact fresh cut mango. So with that said, we'll get started here. So this was a combination literature search and interview process. So we followed a specific methodology, which is a very common methodology for conducting these kinds of searches. We searched the literature. We actually went to a number of trade shows and had in-person interviews. And as we went through that process, both the literature search and the in-person and Zoom interviews, we began to modify what we were looking at, augment to what we were looking at, so that we got the final report, which you'll see here today. I apologize. This is a very difficult slide to read. It's really something that in the report you'll be able to look at. But this is something that we at QFresh use. It's called a mind map, and it's really just getting all of our thoughts on one page, in one format, that we can begin to look at all of the things that we want to factor into the literature search. So this is more of a tool for us when we perform the literature search, but we've included it in the report to give you an idea of what our thought process was as we created this and went forward. So the executive summary, the top level, in order to optimize the quality of fresh cut mango, even before we get to the mechanical processing, and this is where I was talking about we need to take a more holistic approach. There are a number of post-harvest steps and treatments required to ensure that the whole fruit is in an optimal state. If the whole mango is not in its optimal state, then even with the best fresh cut equipment, packaging, post-harvest physiology, quality will not be optimized. And this is something when I'm teaching throughout the world that we stress and reinforce all the time. If you don't start with good quality, you're not going to improve it as the process moves forward. And one of the things with mango that's very, very critical is proper peeling and subdermal removal. They're vital to shelf life extension. So we're going to be talking about automated peeling equipment versus, hand peeling equipment and hand operations. There are advantages and disadvantages of each, but whatever you choose, whatever path you choose, getting it properly peeled is critical for optimal shelf life and quality. It's also critical to understand your process, distribution channel, retail outlet, in order to choose the optimal equipment or packaging. The most important steps of the process include proper application of pre-treatments, including things like potentially 1-MCP, firming and anti-browning additives, washing in sanitized water, then peeling and slicing, and final modified atmosphere packaging. That's basically the steps that you're going through after harvest. And in today's world, you really can't forget about sustainable packaging. It should be a part of the design process. We're going to spend a few minutes at the very end of the webinar and talk briefly about sustainable packaging and how it also impacts quality and shelf life. So again, and this kind of just, it's difficult to read, I understand, but in the report you'll be able to see it. We put together really a process map for fresh cut mangoes. What are the various processing steps, and what can we look at, and what can we document about each of those steps, and what are the key inputs of each of those steps? So you've got receiving, you've got fruit quality, you've got storage before processing, conditioning, ripening, firmness, sanitation before processing, processing temperatures and conditions, post-processing quality assurance, staging, transport and distribution, and then retail. Each one of those plays an important part as you're moving through the whole system. So when we talk about processing, fresh cut produce deteriorates faster than unprocessed raw materials. I'm sure most of you already know that. It's a pretty, it's a well understood concept. And it's due to the damages caused by minimally processing methods, peeling, slicing, dicing. Whenever you cut into a fresh product, there are a number of physiological things that happen, including increased respiration rate, wounding physiology. And there's been a lot of research that's been done and published about the specifics of peeling and cutting. Certainly, the sharper the knives, the more complete the peel, those impact the ultimate quality of the fresh produce and how quickly it's going to deteriorate. So you need to minimize that cut surface browning, that those oxidation reactions. You can get decreased nutritional value. So this highlights the need for proper and optimal post-harvest handling, processing, and packaging. So you need to do it right. And you're going to hear this over and over from me during this webinar, is the importance of peeling and processing to minimize the damage to the fruit, and also to be able to get a complete peel and a clean cut. So that therefore we can see that in order to optimize the quality of fresh cut mango, even before we get to the mechanical processing operations and equipment, there are a number of post-harvest steps and treatments required to ensure that the whole fruit is in its optimal state. And washing is one of those key functions that should should take place. You should be washing the fruit, wash perhaps multiple times to minimize potential contamination from the fruit peel. This is also not only a food quality, but a food safety issue. Fruit should go through cleaning line using brushes to wash any soil from the fruit. A fruit cleaner is recommended in the first wash, followed by one or multiple rinse steps containing antimicrobial. The antimicrobial is there to prevent cross-contamination, so that if you do have issues with one piece of fruit, it doesn't contaminate everything else in the container. Mangoes used for fresh cut processing are usually washed at the packing house, but they should be washed again and rinsed with water containing antimicrobial immediately prior to processing. So, not only from a food safety standpoint, but from a food quality standpoint, you want to minimize that biological load. You want to minimize the availability of plant pathogens, Pseudomonas, yeast, and molds, things that are going to decrease your shelf life going forward. And we found that washing fresh cut mango may or may not improve the outcomes. The mango has a natural wounding response once cut. This wounding response is a sticky substance of mainly enzymes and sugars that help to seal off the cut surface of the mango. If this is washed away, other treatments, probably like a peel, ascorbic acids, anti-browning solutions, are beneficial to seal the outer coat of the mango to prevent dehydration. So this is talking about washing after the mango is cut, not washing prior to. And so there may be advantages, there may not be advantages. Further research is needed in that area, but multiple washing steps before cutting is critical. Washing after cutting, not necessarily. So there are a number of different kinds of equipment out there for washing. We looked at not only washing, but the cutting, peeling, slicing. We looked at and interviewed a number of equipment companies. Our perspective on this is not to recommend one versus other per se. There are pluses and minuses to all of them, just like there are pluses and minuses in machine cutting versus hand cutting. It's really understanding your system, your volumes, your process, your distribution channel, your retail outlets or food service, and making a determination of which one is best for your operation. So it is not a situation where if you pick brand A, all your problems are solved, or if you pick brand B, but you need to you need to understand which one works best for you. So in the case of pre-wash tanks, PND, the company PND SRL has a number of products that are available to use for pre-wash tanks. There are other companies out there besides just these companies, but we focused on the ones that we were able to have interviews with and good discussions around. SWC ABL also has fruit washing machines. They have multiple sizes and multiple speeds. One of the things that's very, very important, whomever you are talking to about the fruit washing or peeling or packaging, any kind of equipment that you're going to be using on processing the mangoes is sanitary equipment design. And there's a lot of used equipment out in the marketplace. There's new equipment out in the marketplace. New equipment, especially in the last 5 to 7 years, has really stepped up the game or the need for sanitary equipment design, making sure that the equipment itself doesn't provide harborage spaces for bacteria. So one of the aspects when you're interviewing which company you want to move forward to is make sure the company has a very active program around sanitary design. this also gets to the point of what's going to work in your operation and how large your operation is, what the floor space is, what the footprint of the equipment needs to be, because that will all factor into that sanitary equipment design. And that's throughout, whether you're hand processing or equipment processing, that sanitary equipment design is critical. And the faster you're processing, the more potential there is for bacterial harborages. This also gets into your cleaning step and your sanitation step between lots or between days to make sure, again, that this equipment and the ease of being able to sanitize the equipment and clean the equipment. How long does it take to do that? That all factors in to the decision-making process. There are a number, moving on to dips, coatings, and treatments. There are a number of treatments that are out there, from alginates to calcium chloride to ascorbic acids. All of them have some benefit. And again, it gets back to what works best for your operation. Alginate coatings at 1% were very promising, but they have some commercial challenges in terms of viscosity, reusability, and cleanliness in a tank application. Calcium chloride seemed to help quality by preventing browning, but also has bitter off flavors, which most consumers would detect. Ascorbic acid, mixed results. Ascorbic acid with and with calcium chloride also had mixed results. So at least in the laboratory testing that we did. So we don't have, based on our research, a specific, if you use this, you're golden. Our research indicated, and this is a reoccurring theme in this whole webinar, is that there are tools out there and you need to determine what those tools do and what works best for your system, whether that's the equipment, whether that's the dips or coatings, whether it's the packaging. It's important to make sure that you create a system that works best for your specific applications. And there are companies and researchers like ourselves that can walk you through that process. But it's so important to understand that one solution does not fit all. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, Jeff, if we just had the right processing equipment, or if we just had the right package, all of our problems would be solved. That's not the way it works. It's a matter of optimizing equipment, processes, packaging systems around your particular application. If you have short distribution, if you're a regional processor versus a national processor, if your volumes are small versus large, where you're getting your mangoes from, and they're coming from different parts of the world at different times of year, that all factors into that decision-making matrix to be able to get the right equipment, the right process, and the right package for you. So P&D also does make a treatment tank. It's available on the marketplace. They're not the only one. There are others that do that as well. So as I've mentioned, with respect to peeling, pitting, and cutting, peeling, cutting, and seed removal are the three primary steps when you're talking about getting a whole mango into a fresh cut mango. Breck and all added that this can also be referred to as peel, pit, and slice, peeling, cutting, seed removal. They're basically all the same thing. As we've already talked about, getting that subdermal removal are vital to shelf life extension of fresh mango. Removing the stem side of the ends of the fresh mango is also vital. Anywhere fibers, channels are present must be removed completely. to stop browning. And this is all around the enzymatic browning, making sure that you get that subdermal layer off and you get the peel off so you don't get any kind of enzymatic browning reactions. And our research showed that fresh cut mangoes do not require additional anti-browning solutions if the peel and subdermal layer are removed. The subdermal layer is clearly visible on the surface of the mango after peeling and is only a couple of millimeters deep. Clean cuts with sharp knives, best method. Peelers can sometimes increase localized browning, and the stem side in particular requires more trimming. So, very often anti-browning solutions are used because of incomplete peeling. People also will use them as a step to make sure that they don't. But our research actually found is if you can get a really good cut and peel, you don't necessarily need the anti-browning solutions. And then here are some pictures of a number of different kinds of equipment that exist out in the marketplace today for peeling, cutting, pitting. We also, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, modified atmosphere packaging improves shelf life outcomes, but is not a complete solve for fresh cut mango. So here we go back. There's not just one technology. Yes, modified atmosphere packaging, reduced oxygen, increased CO2 shows benefit, but you don't necessarily use it without having all of the other steps done properly prior to. So while at the Fruit Logistics Show in Berlin, and I should step back, all of the research for this report was done in 2023. In just a few minutes, we'll be discussing there are some advances that have taken place since 2024, which we will mention verbally in this presentation, but are not included in the report because they came out, after the report was submitted. So while at Fruit Logistica in Berlin in 2023, we met with 3 different separate mango equipment manufacturers to discuss and view the processing equipment. The equipment ranged from large to small, from automatic to manual. All of the companies we interviewed and equipment we saw was of very high quality, good sanitary design, professional, and were engaged. So our takeaway was when determining which equipment is best for your operation, it is a matter of which one meets your specific parameters versus the quality of one company over another. So we did not find if you go with P&D, they've got better quality versus ZTI or ABL or Astra. Not the case. They all have pluses and minuses. Some of them are geared much towards larger, faster operations. In fact, ABL, since 2024, has come out with even faster equipment. Now, we did not get a chance to look at that, but we're told it's a very good piece of equipment. So again, does that make sense for your operation? Only you can make that decision. Some people are still hand cutting and doing it very, very successfully. And certainly from a capital standpoint, hand cutting is going to be much less capital costs, but you have much higher labor costs. You need, on all of these equipment, you need to, and this is an area that's important to look at, is how easy is it to sharpen the knives? How easy is it to clean the knives and clean the equipment? So again, it's not really saying go with this unit or don't go with that unit. It's do your due diligence, do your research, talk to everybody and make sure what you get meets what you need. So as we talked about, there's a number of pieces of equipment. ZTI has a number of peelers and destoners, a variety of sizes, as does ABL. Again, ABL is the company that has come out with an even higher throughput operation. And most of these are module, and you can get small, medium, and large to a certain extent, but some focus more on the larger, some focus more on the smaller. The P&D generally, at least what we saw, was a little bit on the smaller side as far as a volume output perspective, but was much more modular. Some of them are also easier to move around than others, and that makes a huge impact depending upon what your processing floor is like. If you have a mango line that's solely devoted to mango, or if you're doing other fresh cut fruits and vegetables and you need to move equipment around. Astra, this is a company out of Japan. They focused very much on the small, semi-automatic kind of equipment. So you load the mango on, you take the mango off, whereas the larger units, that's all automated. This is very much a smaller, for a smaller operation, but did a very, very nice job of peeling the mango. And then, of course, there's manual peeling, which a lot of people still do this, especially smaller operations. Some plants prefer processing mangoes manually. In the case the processing line has workstations where the same person peels, splits the fruit along the sides of the pit, cuts and packs, or they have workstation with specialized tasks, more of an assembly line program. Again, pros and cons. For a smaller operation where you're just getting started or you're only processing certain days a week or certain days a month, then the Astra or hand peeling is a better option. The larger ones, the ABL, the P&D, the ZTIs, they're really designed for a more continuous operation and a much, much higher output. As we talked about modified atmosphere packaging, switching kind of now away from or moving through that production line, going from the whole now to the fresh cut peeling and now into the packaging. Modified atmosphere packaging can be used for both the whole mango as well as the fresh cut to increase overall quality. So you can actually use modified atmosphere on the transportation of the whole mango from the field to the processing facility. And then you can use modified atmosphere packaging on the cut mango from the processing facility into the retail or food service environment. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is just kind of the definition of modified atmosphere packaging. You want to lower the oxygen level. That lowers the respiration rate, the physiological properties of the mango. It can impact or retard enzymatic browning reactions. It retards ethylene production. You can, by also increasing the CO2, you're preventing an environment that retards the growth of spoilage bacteria. So basically, modified atmosphere package, you're reducing the oxygen, you're increasing the carbon dioxide. Now, one of the misnomers that's still out in the industry is that you have to do something to create a modified atmosphere package. But because we're dealing with, and this is for all fruit and vegetables, because we're dealing with something that's alive, that's respiring, that is consuming oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide, the mere act of placing fruit into a sealed package, you have by definition created a modified atmosphere package. So make sure you understand it may not be the right package. It certainly may not be optimized, but make no mistake about it. You have created a modified atmosphere package just by putting, whether it's whole fruit or fresh cut fruit, into a sealed package. So make sure you understand the impact of your packaging and what the impact of it is having on your product, and understand if you need to actually design that package to give you a better modified atmosphere. There's a wide variety of packaging available for fresh cut mango. There's a wide variety of packaging equipment that is available for fresh cut mango, from bags to stand-up pouches to trays with lidding film to flow wrap packages over trays. There's polymer solutions, there's fiberboard solutions, there's biopolymer solutions, there's some compostable solutions. All of them, and ladies and gentlemen, have advantages and disadvantages. Just like the processing equipment, just like the any kind of dips or coatings, there's not one answer to say, okay, if you put your mango into this, you're going to have optimized quality. We can design an optimized quality package irregardless of its geometry or look. We just mean to understand what geometry we're going for, understand what kind of packaging we want, and then we can work around that to create a proper modified atmosphere package. And again, more specifically, there's suppliers that offer fiber. There are suppliers that offer meshed ridge tray. There are suppliers, which again, probably for mango is not a real high need, but you can actually do microwave cook-in and steam-in packaging. All that is doable as long as you understand the impact of that packaging and if it makes sense for what you're trying to do. So there are advantages and disadvantages of each type of packaging. This should be a reoccurring theme now in this presentation, that there is not a one right solution, but understanding what works best for your application. And here we have listed a whole number of packaging companies that you can, this is certainly not all of them, but these are some of the more common packaging companies, whether it's rigid trays or flexible, that are used currently to process fruits and vegetables, including packaging. And then we get into different kinds of packaging equipment. There's vertical equipment, there's horizontal equipment, there's bag equipment. And we have listed a number of those with links to be able to get those common, to be able to get access to those common pieces of packaging equipment. And you can see here, this is pictures of a vertical operation. Now, one of the advantages of a vertical packaging system, and this is used primarily for bags or stand-up pouches, is that you've got a drop height, so you can get into bruising. But the footprint on the floor is very relatively small, and these can be high speed. Whereas if you go to a horizontal packaging machine, you don't have nearly the drop height, so you have less bruising. You can actually load the trays by hand, but they have a very large footprint by comparison. So they need a lot more space within the operation. Generally, you wouldn't use this for a bag. This would be more of a tray kind of application. And there's a lot of work being done with compostable trays and fiberboard trays and what's called bagasse, which is a sugarcane tray or a bamboo tray. Again, advantages and disadvantages. One of the advantages of a fiber tray is you're using a more renewable resource. You're not using a natural gas-based plastic, but you also lose the visibility. And shipping costs can be higher because you can't get as many trays into the truck. And we could do a whole seminar, in fact, we do, whole seminars on trying to figure out what makes the most sense for a quote-unquote sustainable package versus non-sustainable, and how does that work through the system. But that all can be factored in. The other thing, and again, for mango, it's not quite as important, but you have to understand what the conditions of use of your package is going to be. In other words, what is that package going to be going through? Are you going to be cooking in the package? Or is it going to be under refrigerated conditions, which for most fresh cut mango, that is where it's going to be used. But it's important to understand, especially in today's world where we're starting to do ready meals and whatnot. So we may have a mango in there that's actually going to be cooked with a ready meal. We need to make sure that the packaging is applicable for the temperature and the distribution that it's going to be used at. So I want to kind of wrap up in the last 10 minutes or so talking about sustainable packaging because it is a big issue this year. I'm sure all of you have heard there are a number of governments that are thinking about banning plastics or limiting plastics. There's discussions about including post-consumer recycled materials in plastics. There's discussions around going to compostable and biodegradable. There's just all kinds of discussions around we need to move to a more sustainable packaging environment for fresh produce. And we spend a lot of time working in that area, working with trade associations, working with governments. We're going to be speaking at the Mango Summit in Florida about this a little bit more. But suffice it to say that a single packaging choice can have many ecological repercussions. So what may be the most sustainable solution for one product or a particular market might not be the same elsewhere. And here's that familiar theme again. There's not just one solution. There's not just one answer. There's not just one package. If you can give me this package, all of my sustainability concerns go away. That just does not exist today. That technology does not exist. So once again, here we are. What works best for your system? What works best for your products? And what are you willing to compromise and give up? That said, what you also need to be looking at is the life cycle analysis. What's happening to that package after it's disposed of? And what is that package doing for you prior to disposal? So is this package going to be like a fast food wrapper that could easily turn into litter? Litter has a much higher incidence of getting into the ocean. Or is this a package that's going to be consumed in a home and then is going to either be recycled or thrown away in the garbage? That has a much less likelihood of getting into the ocean if you're concerned about ocean plastics. So understanding the full life cycle of that package is paramount to making sure that you're choosing the right package for the right application. So not only do we have dips, coatings, cutting equipment, making sure things are sharp, they can be cleaned. We're saying, okay, package, yes, we probably want modified atmosphere for fresh cut. We may even want modified atmosphere for whole, depending upon where we are in the distribution channel. But we also want to look at sustainable options. And can we bring in some kind of sustainable option for our packaging? And again, I'm not going to go through this portion of it in a lot of detail. There are bio-based and biodegradable packaging materials. They come from a variety of different sources. They all have advantages and disadvantages. This slide is difficult to read, but I put it up here because these are all quote unquote biodegradable polymers. So it's not just one thing. It can be many different things, and making sure that you're choosing one that A, gives you the sustainability objectives met, but also functionally is giving you what you need. This slide, though, is important, and I want to spend just a second on this to make sure you understand what degradable and compostable means. And there's actually two key steps without going too far down the rabbit hole. When you have the biodegradation of polymers, the first is what's called depolymerization, or the change cleavage step. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the easy one. This is where the big piece of plastic breaks out down into a whole bunch of small little pieces of plastic, and they kind of go away from the visual standpoint. So you're thinking that you've done your duty, It's no longer this big piece of plastic. It's all these small pieces of plastic. Well, those can actually turn into microplastics, which is an even worse situation. The second step, which is even more critical and more important, is known as mineralization. And this is where those small little bits of plastic turn into biomass, minerals, salts, water, CO2, and CH4. It's that second step that has to take place in order for a polymer to be truly biodegradable. Now, compostable is a form of biodegradability, but has to happen under certain conditions. An industrial composter, you have high heat, and it has to go through a certain and degrade in a certain amount of time. Home compostable, lower heat, longer amount of time. But either one, industrial compostable or home compostable, still need to meet that two-step biodegradable process. And here you can see, here is step one, these two, and then your final step over here, where you're actually breaking those little pieces of plastic down into the raw materials. The other thing with sustainable packaging, yes, you want it to do so, you want it to be recyclable, use post-consumer recycle, but it still has to meet all the properties you originally wanted that package to do. There's a growing number of entrepreneurs and researchers that are working to turn food products into packaging. Very exciting field of study right now. Unfortunately, volumes are still on the small side, but they will continue to increase. So at the end of the day, optimally designed packaging plays a critical role. Optimally designed equipment plays a critical role. And when I say optimally designed, I mean for your operation, making sure that the equipment you buy, the processing equipment, the processes that you use, the packaging that you use works for your application. At the end of the day, what are the customer requirements and what creative technologies can be brought to bear to address those requirements? Packaging, and I should have added processing, must be an integral part of the whole new product development process. You need to be thinking about these things very early on, long before you launch your product, to make sure that you minimize cost, or at least make those cost efficient. You get the right equipment for your application, your process, your room, your value. And don't forget, and you will have seen it in this presentation, there's very good equipment within the US, but there's also equally, if not better, good equipment in Europe. Don't be afraid to look outside your own country for potential solutions. And I believe that does it, with about 15 minutes to spare for questions and answers.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Jeffrey. So right now we have a comment from Dr. Breck, and I know Eric addressed it, but I also want to read it out to you. And it says, we found when evaluating fruit peeling and slicing machines in 2019 that it's important to know how advanced the ripeness stage the machine can handle, plus how easily the machine can be adjusted for fruit of different ripeness stages. So one machine that they tested required a technician from the manufacturer to come out and make adjustments.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I should have mentioned that the stage of ripeness is critical. Being able to adjust for ripeness is critical. And this goes back to, where are you sourcing your mangoes from? What kind of quality are you getting? And being able to adjust for ripeness within that unit. Absolutely. Excellent point, Jeff.
Is there any maturity that functions better for the equipment?
So, and I may let Eric step in on this one too. The firmer, and it's a balance. The firmer the mango, the easier it is to mechanically process. The softer the mango, the more difficult. But the firmer the mango often translates to less flavor, and less taste. So it's this balancing act, and I'm sure everybody's been in a restaurant or a salad bar, or sometimes even in an airplane, where you'll get a fresh cut fruit. It will look fantastic, but it's very hard and has the taste of either bland or cardboard. And that's the trade-off. A lot of equipment likes to process very early stage mango, so it's very, very firm. It's easier to process, it's easier to slice, but the trade-off is flavor. So when you're looking at equipment, being able to move through different stages of ripeness is important.
Here we have another question from Luis, and it says, when do you recommend using absorbic acid after cutting?
Eric, do you want to field that one?
Sure. I think that one's preference. What we've found, so ascorbic acid, it's going to add a little bit of flavor. That might be a good or a bad thing, depending on the type of mango you're using, the ripeness of the mango. I would say using ascorbic acid is going to improve consistency, both in texture and color. So you'll have a more consistently kind of colored product. It does kind of slightly change the color of the mango post cutting. But in the testing we found, it wasn't 100% necessary to use ascorbic for stopping browning, for texture. The mango is a low pH product. It holds color pretty well. Modified atmosphere, we found, was enough to push that shelf life to long enough for commercial applications. But using ascorbate will improve the texture a little bit, will give you a more consistent color. It is a different color, slightly different. And so it's kind of preference. My take on it, if you can get consistent ripeness, not overripe, and you can consistently get the whole epidermal layer off, then I would prefer no ascorbate. I worked quite a bit with sliced apples and some other sliced products, and some consumers are more sensitive to ascorbate. They're even more sensitive to like citrics, but they can taste ascorbate at certain levels. But I would say 90% don't. And so it's kind of preference. It will give you a little bit more consistent application, but then you need to keep your tanks clean, and you need to get your application very consistent, and you need to get your percentage of ascorbate more consistent. So there's trade-offs to both. Either way could work. Ideally, I would try and target no ascorbate, but it's kind of dealer preference whether or not you use it or not.
Thank you, guys. So there is another question from Oscar. It says, are there some varieties less likely to browning reactions due to their composition?
Eric, you want to take that one?
There definitely are. We found that Kent's, for example, had a much lower browning potential than some other ones. It's very similar to apples and the length of time post cutting to the first kind of browning reaction. And the longer that is, so let's say you cut a mango and you leave it out and you see how long it takes to brown, that will be a pretty good feed in and indication of downstream browning later on in shelf life. And so kind of that initial browning reaction and speed of it definitely feeds in, but there definitely are, and this is more spelled out in the reports, which are available through the Mango Board, of which ones have a higher and a lower kind of propensity to browning.
Yeah, and I would add to that, we didn't talk about it in this paper as much as we did in the previous paper, where it was spelled out in much more detail. So if you want to look at the research, and of course there's other research out there too by the University of Florida and others, but our research was spelled out in the previous report that we did last year.
And the second part to his question around low capacity machines potentially increasing browning. Surprisingly, what we found was it's more important to get the entire peel off and the entire epidermal layer off for anti-browning versus if you actually punctured the mango or shaved a little bit too far. That actually didn't increase browning. That caused some other potential issues with more wounding response. But it was really more important to get that whole mango peel off, that whole epidermal layer.
And just to add to that, both of those reports are going to be on the National Mango Board website in case anyone's interested in seeing them. We have another question. We have a question from Miguel, and it says, what processes are there for very mature mangoes when it comes to fresh cut?
I think if you're going to look at very mature mango, you're probably going to be more into the smaller pieces of equipment and or manual. I think that the larger automatic high throughput machines are going to struggle with that. With the Astra machine, which was that very small machine, and they have ones that are smaller and bigger and ones that have, slightly more output than the others, but it's much more of a semi-automatic, partially manual operation. That's going to do better with a really mature mango, as is manual peeling. And I think so. What that means is the more mature the mango, especially if you're in the very mature, your output's going to go down. Your throughput is going to be reduced.
Is there more loss when you do fresh cut on mature mangoes? Is that why your output is decreased?
Say that again, Natalia?
Your output be decreased with more mature mangoes?
Your output will be decreased with more mature mangoes because I think that the higher output automatic equipment is going to struggle getting that outer layer and the epidermal layer off 100% and cleanly with a very, very mature mango. So the manual equipment or the manual slicing, the smaller the equipment, which has lower outputs, are going to be better suited for that kind of mango.
I think that might be also. Once again, Jeffrey, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And we will be posting a link to access the recording on the National Mango Board's website. We look forward to your participation in future webinars. The following one will be done by Dr. Italo Cavalcante, and it will focus on improving mango fruit quality. We will have it on May 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. This concludes our session. Thank you all for attending.